Welcome to the February 10th, 2026 meeting of Overeaters Anonymous Recovery from Relapse. Our speaker today is Mark F. And Mark came to OA in 2020, and he's from Southeast London. Mark, please take it away.
Thanks, Laurie. Hi, guys. My name's Mark. I'm a compulsive overeater. Thank you for everyone giving your service. I'm extremely nervous. This is a very big meeting, but I'm grateful to be here with all of you. And just before I get started, I just want to say the set-aside prayer. God, please help me to set aside everything I think I know for an open mind and new experience. Please help me see the truth about OA, about my disease, about the 12 steps, and most importantly, about you. Please remove my fear also. So like Louis said, my name is Mark. I'm a compulsive overeater. And I'm going to share what my life was like before OA, what it's been like during the process, and what my life's like now. So I was born into, a young toxic relationship. And my real father never wanted me when I was a kid. He wanted to have me aborted, and he wanted to put me up for adoption. And my mum said no, and my father wasn't a nice man. He got arrested on the day of my mum and his wedding, and that was for armed robbery, by the way, that I found out later in life. And he just used me as a tool to hurt my mum. He was a violent man, so he used to beat me and my mum, and he'd spend the little money we did have on alcohol and drugs and left us with nothing. He went to the courts and tried to get custody of me, but he didn't, thank God. And I remember one time when I was younger, he kidnapped me from my mum and put me in a new school and stuff like that. And yeah, it was just a really traumatic experience. And then my mum, bless her, was left as a single parent. She was a survivor of domestic abuse, and she just had a stream of unworthy boyfriends who treated her badly. So I grew up on the breadline, never knowing where my next meal was coming from. At times, so I'd become best friends with the dinner ladies at school. I'd be the nicest little kid I could be. I would always, be really helpful, put the chairs away, do whatever it took, so that I'd get the extra bigger portions. So, I'd get seconds and thirds, and I'd eat as much as I possibly can in as quick a time as I possibly can before the bell went. And I went to many different schools. My mum was one of us, but she never found recovery, unfortunately. And I become best friends with every single dinner lady at every school I went to. My mum used to get itchy feet and would move every couple of years. So I'd always have to make friends with new people. My mum lost 2 children, and I was the only child left surviving. I would have had an older brother and a younger sister, and she went through a lot of trauma. And I remember I had an immense amount of pressure on me to perform and be the good kid. And if I wasn't, I was told, other kids would have done that for mum. So I always remember from an early age my food becoming my best friend. It was my comfort. I'd get a sanctuary most weekends when I get to go to my nan's, and my nan's was like a mecca for me. I could eat whatever I wanted, and my nan was a bit of a feeder. And she's the reason I'm still alive today. She was my world, and she bailed me and my mum out countless times. I'd eat my nan out of house and home, she'd say, and so I had a lot of trauma and an unstable home life for so long. And I remember I couldn't even sleep without white noise. Then when I was about 9 years old, I got sexually abused by a man for a couple of years. And, even the promise of food kept me quiet for those few years. The abuser used to say to me, Mark, you can have whatever you want. We'll go to the shops and you can eat whatever you want. And that used to keep me quiet. And it did for a few years. I'd daydream about all of the foods that I could have. And I had a breakdown as a kid and had a lot of childhood therapy. And, I wasn't able to stay in school for very long. I kept falling out of school and, with my breakdowns and stuff. But the reason I mention all of this is, because through all of that, you can still recover, no matter wherever you've been, no matter how far down the scale, recovery is possible. And I could eat because I've been sexually abused or beaten, or because it's Tuesday, or because it's raining, or because of whatever, fill in the blank. I can eat because of anything. Um, and then when I got abused, that gave my disease a really, really good fighting chance. And that Mark will fix him with food. He needs whatever he needs. So fast forward, I become a qualified chef, shock horror. That gave my disease a free reign and an access to a lot of food. And I'd manipulate and become best friends with the kitchen boys, or wherever I was working. And I have stolen food. I've eaten food out of the bin. I've eaten stale food. Sorry. I've eaten burnt food, spoiled food. I used to work in bars and restaurants, and that for most of my career back then. I remember eating frozen packs of ham that was in the freezer for Christmas, that come in a Christmas hamper, and I'd be sitting on it, and I'd have a bad tummy because I'd be eating this half-eaten, half-frozen food, and I'd eat so fast that I could get some of whoever's food I was with. I did block out a lot of my childhood through therapy, and it took me years to be able to talk openly about my abuse. And I always thought it was because I was different, or because I did something bad, that's why that happened. But the few memories I do have from when I was younger was all about food. I can tell you about what food was at what event, but anything else I can't really tell you. So yeah, I was always a fat kid. I always got bullied at school, never having the latest trends and stuff like that. But I'm grateful for the food today, because it did work at some time in my life, and it got me through some tough times in my life. In my late teens, I discovered drugs and alcohol and cigarettes, and I used and abused them for years. And I used to worship money and work crazy hours, waiting tables because I earned more money than what I did in the kitchen. And I put myself in so many dangerous situations, getting on the back of motorbikes drunk when I was in the Dominican Republic, and, just being really reckless with my life. And, in 2014, my life was really unmanageable. I was a carer for my mum from the age of 9. So I was like cooking, cleaning, and paying bills. And, I tried to take my own life a few times and took overdoses when I was younger. And so I hated my job. I was working in TGI Fridays because that's where I earned the most money. And I tried to self-destruct many times, and my life was hell. So I did what the big book tells us is that geographical cure. I decided to move to Spain and get a job in Spain. And whilst I was out in Spain, when I was out in Spain, so I went out to Spain and I was in loads of debt. And when I was in Spain, in Tenerife, I became manically ill. I drank 48 cans of Red Bull in a few days. I'd lost my passport, my phone, my belongings, and I couldn't even talk in an audible language. I was, not even audible. And I'd been out there a few months, so I was very tanned. And I remember getting beaten by the Spanish police and put into a few different police holdings there. And then they put me in this really backwards psychiatric hospital in the north of the island where nobody spoke English, or very broken English, and I don't talk Spanish. And I genuinely didn't know what was going to happen to me. I was heavily sedated. I was handcuffed to the bed. My life was really, really hard at that time. And I was in there for a couple of months in that psychiatric hospital. And thankfully, the company I work for kept me employed. And after a few months, they flew me back to the UK with a doctor and a nurse. And I was put into a psychiatric hospital here, which was like a Disneyland compared to what it was over there. And in 2015, I had the worst year of my life. I kept on eating and eating. I didn't laugh that year. I was in a really bad dark depression, got diagnosed with bipolar and lots of other mental health problems. And that year I put on 10 stone, which is about 140 pounds, I think. Yeah, 140 pounds. And, I went up to 28 stone 12, which is £404. And I never thought I'd be that big. My life was just hell. The blood blisters, the chub rub, the breathlessness, the fat smell. It hurt to roll over in bed. I'd sit down to pee because my knees would be aching. And I just kept eating and eating. And it wasn't, the food stopped working. The food just wasn't soothing me anymore. I tried gyms, diets, pills, potions, tablets, books. I tried everything. Nothing worked for me. I tried not drinking alcohol, no sweetener. Nothing worked. I did go to a diet club once and I had some success and I lost about 12 stone.
That's 20 minutes.
Thank you. I lost about 12 stone, which was, I thought, yeah, I've got it this time. But, for a real compulsive overeater like me, I put it all back on and then some. So I first ever heard about OA in 2017. A friend of a friend told me about it. I come to one meeting, got the identification, heard the word God and was like, nope, it's not for me. It's a cult. It's something else. I'm not doing it. So I didn't. And then so grateful for lockdown, because in 2020, I come back into OA via Zoom. And, it really hit some desperation then. Excuse me. I found a sponsor after I'd went to my 6 meetings. And that sponsor worked the steps through an approach called the Big Book Awakening approach, but it took me 7 months to get through the first 3 steps. It was a really in-depth process and it just wasn't working for me. I just kept picking up. I had a diet soda addiction. I'd drink Pepsi Max, oh my gosh, like 8 liters plus a day. And then I moved from bottles to cans because I couldn't keep track of that. I had a full-size refrigerator in my room. I couldn't go into a shop without buying any soda. I needed it. I needed that fix. I have had a few different sponsors in program, and I feel like there's many different sponsors in OA because we all learn, develop and grow differently. Some people need a really strict and rigid sponsor, someone needs a little bit more, a bit more soft and fluffy, I guess, of course not watering down the message. And there's many different ways up the mountain, but that view from the top is all the same. And I've worked the steps fully 3 times and I've survived I've had 3 major relapses as well. And God willing, on the 24th of this month, I'll be 17 months sober. This is the longest I've ever had in program. Thank you. But my last relapse, it's the Big Book tells us that it's a progressive and fatal illness and it gets worse, never better. And I went up to 32 stone 9, which was £464. And I never thought I would get that big. My mum, when she was younger, got to 32 stone and then she'd become a restricted under 12 stone. And I remember saying I'd never get that big. I'd never allow myself to be like that. I'd do something. I'd have an intervention. I'd do something else. I'm powerless over food. For me, I have no control once I take that first bite. I've got a mental obsession, a physical allergy and a spiritual malady. And I was desperate and I relapsed because I thought to myself, I had a lurking notion that these new weight loss jabs that had come out, these new injections is the answer, Mark. You can still eat what you want and then you can just inject yourself and you'll be fine. So Mark being Mark and me having that ism, always wanting that bit more, I got these injections off of a friend on Facebook, and I didn't have a clue what was in it. They come in a clear little vial in like a little baggie with some clean needles, and I was injecting myself with this thing, feeling like absolute death. And I kept in contact with my sponsor, who I've worked the steps with fully 3 times, and she said to me, Mark, how's your life working out for you now? And I was like, oh, it's not. And she said, so what have you got to lose? What have you got to lose apart from, working the steps again and getting that connection with your higher power? I asked myself, why did I relapse? Because I stopped going to meetings. I stopped doing service. I stopped working the program and using the tools because I got complacent. I got lazy. I am under no delusion today that if I put that, one bite of my trigger food in my mouth, I'm gone. I'm away with the horses. I don't decide when the addiction's done or the binge is done. The disease does. Because one bite is too many, and 1,000's not enough, you know. And I had to really work the steps, the desperation of a drowning man, because my life does depend on it. You know, I will be £600 having carers wipe my bed sores. You know, I've got to be under no delusion for that. You know, I was almost bedbound and my life was hell. You know, what else have I got to lose, Mark? You know, for me, nothing else worked. There's only two doors. You know, either I die with the death of the 1,000 cuts with this disease, you know, some kills us slower than some other substances, or, you know, I work my hair off, work the program, not my hair's on fire, you know, to get a connection with my higher power. And I had to really create a hospital to home rehab at home when I first come into program. For me, I didn't need the hospital, but I needed to, you know, create a really safe environment. For me, that meant go to as many meetings as I possibly can, you know, do the outreach, literature, I use the tools. I had to be really mindful of what I watched on the television, not watching too much of it. You know, I couldn't even trust myself to go into a supermarket. I get my groceries delivered and only what I need for my food plan. And it's painful. It's painful to put down the food, but, you know, just for today, sometimes a day feels like too much, you know, just for this moment, for this hour, I can do it. You know, I can get myself in bed tonight, absent on my pillow with my 3 meals a day. You know, for me, that's what works. 3 meals a day, no snacks in between. And yeah, I just want to touch on step 4, because for me, when I come into program and I went to a lot of meetings, I heard step 4 and step 9, and they were the 2 steps that I was the most petrified of. And, you know, step 4, I was so afraid to do it, but it was one of the most powerful steps for me. You know, I loved the first 3 columns, whereas, you know, being able to say, yeah, I'm resentful at so-and-so because, and this affects me because, but then when I come into the 4th column and where have I been selfish, self-seeking, dishonest, and I'm like, oh, I don't like this because it makes me feel things I don't want to feel. But the common denominator in all of that is me. You know, I'm the person that has got all of that stuff related in all of the step 4s. And it did really open my eyes, you know. But sitting in step 4 too long is like sitting in a dirty nappy, you know, it's just uncomfortable. You don't want to do it. So you just have to get through it for me. And I'm powerless over people, places, and things. You know, the only thing I can do is clean my side of the street. Doesn't matter that, you know, what everyone else has done to me. I'm powerless over them. You know, all I can do is put my head on the pillow, clean. Yeah, I've cleaned my side of the street. You know, and step 9 is where the magic happens for me. And I've skipped over a few steps, but step 9, making amends. I was really, really fearful to do that. You know, it took time for me to make an amends because I had to genuinely be wanting to make that amends, you know, being sincere, because, you know, I had to pray for willingness because I've got no right to hurt others. And, you know, says, doesn't it, love, so tolerance, pity, and patience. Oh my God, let me take a breath because I'm getting really nervous. I'm like, Mark, you're mucking up. Step 9, yep. So making an amends process. Had to run every amend past my sponsor because I've got no right to harm others. And I had to, you know, say that resentment prayer on repeat over and over every morning, multiple times a day for some people, you know, because it took more than a couple of weeks for me to, you know, grant the same tolerance, pity, and patience I cheerfully grant a sick friend. You know, we don't hurt sick people that way. We wouldn't treat sick people that way, so we don't hurt sick people that way, is what I was trying to say there. And, you know, most of my amends, people didn't hold me accountable to what I did, or they didn't even remember what I was apologising for. But there were some people that didn't accept my amends, and that was okay. You know, it's not my job if they accept it or not. I've done my part, I've apologised. And that's okay, you know, not everyone has to accept that. It's not up to me how they take the amends. It's just up to me that I've done a genuine, sincere amends. And every time I've worked the steps, more and more has been revealed. I was so resentful in the beginning. I remember having loads and loads of resentments, and I was resentful at, you know, my sexual abuser. And I was resentful at this guy, Michael, who stole the last Yorkshire pudding at a Christmas dinner when I was 6. Like, I just hold on to all of this stuff that it's just kept me so like fluffy and full-headed and in so much anger and resentment. And I thought the world and its dog was against me when I come into program. You was all doing everything to piss me off. You had a vendetta out against just me, you know, and that's not the truth. That's my disease talking in my head. You know, so it was really free and process working the steps. It's simple, but not easy. You know, I continue today to live in steps 10, 11, and 12. And I do my step 10s as and when they come up, because for me, you know, resentment is a luxury of normal men. For me, I'll eat over those resentments, you know, the insanity that I'll show you by having a massive binge.
That's 10
I
minutes.
Thank you. I'm drinking poison and expecting you to die. That's just the insanity of this disease, you know. And the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Yeah. And so what is my life like today? Since I've got 10 minutes left, right? Yeah. So I'm grateful today for my sponsor and my higher power, because they've saved my life today. And God, I feel emotion coming up. And having an attitude of gratitude has turned my life around, you know, looking what I'm grateful for every day. You know, I do a gratitude list every morning, and I'll do gratitude lists in the evening as well. You know, every day may not be a good day, but there's good to be found in every single day. And you know, it's like the story of the two wolves. You know, we've got the two wolves inside of us. One of them is, you know, positive, calm, serenity, you know, love, all of the nice things you can think of. And the other one's, you know, negativity, you know, hurt, anger, hatred. And, you know, whatever wolf wins is the one you feed. So if I focus on the good, good will come. If I focus on the bad, bad's going to come, you know. Yeah, my higher power has done for me what I cannot do for myself. You know, I'm a gutter bottom addict, and I will soothe with whatever I possibly can. You know, so thanks to my higher power and work with the program and my sponsor, my gosh, I'm such a diva as well. The amount of hissy fits I had with my sponsor over putting things down. She was a saint. But, you know, thanks to this program, I've put down my binge foods, my binge behaviors, alcohol and drugs has gone. Pepsi Max has gone. That was an addiction of hell. Pepsi Max is one of the hardest things I've had to quit in my life. And I tried. Oh my gosh, my skin felt like it was crawling up my body, but it is possible, you know. Cigarettes went down, which is the miracle of my higher power. I was a 40-a-day smoker. I smoked from the age of 13. My mum smoked. Yeah, and that I enjoyed smoking, but my higher power did not want that for me. You know, and then these come down bit by bit, by the way. I didn't put all these down in one time. It was like, you know, it says, you know, more's revealed, the longer in program, the more that's revealed. So for the longer in my journey, the more that's gone down. And I'm probably about 2.5 years cigarette free. I'd never picked that back up again with the second time I did the steps. Sweetener had to go, you know, sweetener and imitation products. My higher power helped me put that down. I had a hissy fit, and my sponsor said to me, "You can just drink water, tea, and coffee." Yeah, but that went down as well. And social media is the latest thing I've put down, which is the first non-substance I've had to put down. But social media for me, I was abusing it and doomsday scrolling, and all I was doing was spending hours upon hours on social media, and I wasn't working my program as well, not connecting to my higher power. I just had to put that down and delete all the apps off my phone, and now I do a lot more outreach than than social media. And then toxic relationships as well. Carmel, can you share the photos, babe, please? Is she still here? Or Catherine, whoever. I forgot about them. I've lost 125 pounds as well. So thank you. So the picture on the left with the pumpkin, that's my stepdad, by the way. That was when I was at 28 stone 12. That's the first time I come into program. And then the one in the middle, I did not like my photos being taken at all. And that's the only reason I've got it, because I tried on this silly mask. And that's when I went up to 32 stone 9. My addictive substance, you can see next to me, that's how I used to drink it all the time. And that photo in the middle is the one that I see and was like, oh my God, that's how I look. And then the other two on the right, this is a friend from a fellow in program actually that come to visit in the summer. And we went about London. And then this is Christmas just gone. So I'm about, 125, 130 pounds down. I've still got a way to go on my journey. Thank you, lovely. You can stop sharing that now. I've still got a way to go on my journey, but progress is not perfect. I'm not like a shiny gold example. I'm not perfect. I'm focusing on the program and I'll lose the weight. And if I focus on the weight, I'll lose the program. And that's been my experience. OA has given me a life from my wildest dreams. That line is what kept me coming back to program, a life from my wildest dreams. Granted, it doesn't look like Channing Tatum in a shower, but it is a life from my wildest dreams. I have got the freedom from food obsession. I love silence today. I get up really early. I love that quiet time in the morning. And before I used to hate silence, I used to hate my head noise. Any day in recovery is better than, any day in the food. It is. And whenever I get a food fault, it's up to me to take that next right action. And yes, I can't control that food fault, but I can control the action I take after that, And I know today when I'm wanting to pick up or eat something, that's just I'm feeling something uncomfortable I need to take action with, because my head will always tell me it's a good idea to eat. It's always a good idea to pick up the food, but it isn't. If I've got 10 problems today, it'll give me 11 tomorrow. It doesn't really work anyway. It's the fantasy is far much better than the reality. Having that attitude of gratitude does really help me. And I'm reminded by a fellow when I'm getting all down on myself or whatever, that some people in the world don't know where the next grain of rice is coming from or glass of clean water. I do. I've got so much to be grateful for. I've got a life that someone in the world somewhere is wishing for today. I look at the world for a new pair of glasses today, and I always look for the gratitude. It didn't come natural to me. I'm not one of these gurus. I had to practice this in the beginning from when I started, just doing 3 a day. I'm not really grateful I've got a fridge or I've got a bag of rice in the cupboard. It took a while to actually have that genuine attitude of gratitude. And one of the biggest miracles of recovery for me is to be at peace and acceptance with my mum. Sorry. Oof. So my mum died of a heart attack in 2021. She got up to go to the toilet in the middle of the night and passed away. And while she was still alive, I got to make an amends to my mum and genuinely feel in my heart that she did the best she could with what she had and what she'd come through in her life. She'd gone through abuse and all of that herself. And there was so much anger and hate towards my mum. At my mum's funeral, people are telling me how lovely a woman she was and how nice she was, and I thought they were talking about someone else. I made an amends to her again when she'd passed, via letter, but to genuinely feel in my heart that she did the best she could with what she had and she was as good mother as she could be is a miracle, because I'd never had that acceptance before, and it was the second time I worked the steps that I got that. It's a miracle to feel that. And I'm blessed to have found a way. It's simple, but it's not easy. But it does work if you can just keep coming back, keep taking that next action. Thank you. Then it'll work. And it's just like, I can go to as many meetings as I want, but if I don't work the steps, I'm not going to get recovery. Just like if I go to a doctor's office and I just keep sitting in the waiting room and not going in and getting my medication and seeing the doctor, I'm not going to get recovered. The same as for us with the steps, And God doesn't make junk, and they say work it because you're worth it, and you are, and if no one's told you today you are loved, you're worthy, you're enough, and God really doesn't make junk. I just want to, before we go, I'm just going to read the acceptance reason on page 417 in the big book. Acceptance is the answer to all my problems today. When I am disturbed, it is because I find some person, place, thing, or situation, some fact of my life unacceptable to me, and I can find no serenity until I accept that person, place, thing, or situation as being the exact way as it's supposed to be at this moment. Nothing, absolutely nothing, happens in God's world by mistake. Until I could accept my alcoholism, compulsive overeating, I could not stay sober. Unless I accept life completely on life's terms, I cannot be happy. I need to concentrate not so much on what needs to be changed in the world as on what needs to be changed in me and my attitudes. And that is a powerful reading for me that I used to read every day, and I read it as much as I can now. I work with sponsees today, I give service, and I am just so grateful to be in this program because it has saved my life. And sorry if I was a bit jittery, but I feel like my time's about to run out. But yeah, thank you so much for asking me to share. Oh my God, I did not see there was 107 people here. I'm glad I didn't look at that. Thank you so much. I'll leave it there.